people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy.
The undisputed super featherweight champion of the world, Alicia, the Bumgarner.
That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Ahead of her upcoming WBO title fight, Dixon said there was no hesitation in accepting the fight. It is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. It is what you are in the sport for. The chance to become a world champion in the women's lightweight division. It's come around really quickly. We thought we would defend the European title in December or early January, but then this opportunity came about. There was no hesitation in accepting the fight. It is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. It is what you are in the sport for.
It all happened so fast.
An order from the IBF comes down ordering both Dixon and Carolyn Dubois to fight each other for the newly vacated IBF title, and before you know it, is fighting for another title, another belt. Who would have even thought of me ever fighting for a world title? I've come from white collar, and everyone used to crap on my performances, and now I'm fighting for a world title. I'm keeping the white collar tag forever, so everyone knows I am about it. It's part of my story. I'm not actually ashamed of it, the progression that I have made. A lot of these girls that have been boxing their whole lives, but I've only been boxing for a few years, and I started at white collar gym and not a reputable boxing gym.
She's come a long way.
It's still a little crazy. Everybody gets into boxing and says that they're going to the Olympics or to win a world title, but I was going to uni to become a pharmacist when I first started boxing. That was what I was focusing on. But when I had my debut, people started saying I was really good, but it was then just a hobby. But then it started getting more serious, and it got to a point where if I wanted to take it further, I had to stop being a pharmacist. But now, I am reaping all of those rewards for the time and training I have put in. But now I feel that I have sneaked up on everyone. She really is a good fighter, even though she doesn't have a deep amateur background. Good enough that former world title challenger Anthony Crolla is training her. He sees something in her, and it's there.
There's real talent there. I'm not saying that to be nice. If I thought she sucked, I'd say she sucks.
She's no good. I'd just come right out and say it, but she is good. Very good. And she's on the cusp of becoming a world champion, though she still does need more time, more fights. There's more work needs doing for Rhiannon. That's why putting her in a fight with Carolyn Dubois at this point in the juncture, that wouldn't have made any sense.
So if you want to say that Rhiannon ducked Carolyn, you can say that, but that's no worse than Carolyn ducking Beatriz Ferreira for the exact same reason, because at this point in her career, she doesn't want to take a fight like that.
Rhiannon addressed that fight saying, "We will meet down the line anyway. Everyone is saying a domestic fight will be great, but I think it will be a bigger and better fight in the long term, and more people will be interested in watching it. I think it works out better for everyone, and it might, because if Rhiannon can become a champion and Carolyn becomes a champion and down the line they meet, that could be a unification match."
Rhiannon needs more experience. She needs more fights. I would like to see her fight this year at least 3 times.
Know that realistically, because of Carolyn Dubois' amateur background and all of those experiences, and how well she's doing in the pros, I don't even know that Rhiannon will ever catch up to her. I don't know that that's a fight that she could ever win. But if she's gonna try to, then she needs more experience. She needs to be busy this year.
She needs to fight at least 3 times. She's got a decent-sized fight in front of her in Karen Carabajal, common opponent between Rhiannon Dixon and Katie Taylor. Katie gave Karen her first professional loss.
Now she's fighting Rhiannon, who says, "I'm confident of winning. I feel like With every opponent, it will be a step up. When I fought Katharina Sanders, some people said it was too far, but I knew it definitely wasn't. My team really put me through it, so come the actual fight, it doesn't feel that bad, because I go through so much worse in training. I feel that is showing in my performances now. Rhiannon needs more experience, and the only way she can get it is through more fights. She needs more fights, because the more you do something, the better you become at it. And the better you become at it, the more confident you become over time. To ways fighting somebody like a Carolyn Dubois isn't such a daunting assignment. Rhiannon Dixon, she's got some great tools. She's fast, she's strong, perhaps not as strong as Carolyn Dubois, but she can punch.
She's a good mid-range to inside fighter.
Throws short hooks, combinations, goes to the body. Her offensive arsenal is impressive. Defensively, she needs to tighten up a bit. That's what needs working on.
More fights is the ticket.
If she is to one day share the ring with Carolyn Dubois, she's going to need the experience and the confidence to do it. And it can be done. It's entirely possible for a fighter that doesn't come from a deep amateur background to beat a standout amateur. Think Obanov versus Jonas.
Femke Hermans versus Mary Spencer. That was a big upset. I didn't see that coming.
But it has happened, and it can happen. Rhiannon just has to be ready for it. The only way to do that is to keep punching, keep fighting.
Look for Dixon versus Carabajal on the undercard of Jordan Gill versus Zelfa Barrett.
Men's super lightweight news ahead of his upcoming fight, his maiden title defense against Isaac Cruz. Romero says, I'm going to be the first superstar on Prime Video.
Superstar.
This is going to be Rolly versus the Chihuahua in the ring on March 30th, said Romero. I'm going to stay world champ and be the first superstar on Prime Video. Just make sure you buy your tickets or tune in on pay-per-view. Don't miss this one.
Okay.
I don't know what kind of autonomy Rolly does or doesn't have, because what he's essentially done is shot himself in the foot, or maybe it was done on his behalf. You've chosen to forego a main event slot with Ryan to fight in a co-main event against Isaac. And the both of those guys, they can beat you, the both of them, but you would have made substantially more money fighting Ryan than you will make fighting Isaac. So why has this happened if it makes no business sense? No business sense for Rolly. And maybe it's because it makes business sense for the PBC. If anybody stands to benefit from this strategy, it's not Rolly, I'll tell you that much, but it is the PBC.
Yeah.
They tell themselves, why should we ship him off to Golden Boy to lose to their boy when he can stay here and lose to one of ours?
Helping to further develop Isaac Cruz as a marquee attraction, crowning him a champion.
Perhaps using that as the lure to get Gervonta Davis in the ring with him for a second time.
Even if it comes at the expense of Rolly Romero, who was never going to amount to much anyway.
In a very general sense, you would sooner turn Isaac Cruz into a marquee attraction than you turn Rolly into a marquee attraction, because if nothing else, Isaac is a Mexican national with a fan-friendly style, and we all know in the American market, nobody spends more money on boxing than the Mexican fight fans. That's why Canelo Alvarez does so well in the American market. Thus, the WBA title would be better kept in the hands of Isaac Cruz than Rolly Romero's, so long as Isaac can pry it from him. And I think he can, because Rolly's not a good fighter.
It's an insult to my intelligence.
You're trying to tell me he's a world champion? You're trying to sell me this stumblebum?
It's an insult to my intelligence.
You're seeing a lot of familiar faces and a lot of familiar names all on this same card as a means to enhance its overall attractiveness and appeal, where normally Romero versus Cruz would have been billed as a main event unto itself.
They've stacked the deck as best as they can. You've got Lara versus Zarafa, Fundora versus Bohachuk, Romero versus Cruz, and in the main event, you have Tszyu versus Thurman.
A main event that is hardly main event worthy, pay-per-view worthy, but that's what the rest of the fights are for. That's why there are so many familiar faces on this same card. Faces and fighters that would normally headline their own shows due to the PBC's limited resources and fight dates. They've crammed them all into this one.
And we'll see what kind of numbers this brings in. Isaac Cruz, who Rolly's gonna be fighting, Isaac is happy about it.
Isaac, who says, I'm very happy and extremely motivated to have this opportunity to fight for the world title. I've worked extremely hard to earn this shot. I've tried to fight other big names, but Rolly was the one to step up and accept the challenge, which is hardly reality. That's not true. Ryan tried to fight you.
Ryan tried to fight him 2 times.
WBC ordered Isaac to fight Shakur Stevenson, and Isaac walked away. I mean, he basically ducked Shakur. So when he says he's tried to fight other fighters, then what fighters is he referring to? Because all he's been doing since he lost to Gervonta Davis is avoiding fights with the other fighters, the other names, at or around this weight, while fighting soft competition on undercards.
Being woefully obtuse, he's misrepresenting the situation, the same as Rolly. But he says,
I've tried to fight other big names, but Rolly was the only one to step up and accept the challenge. He's got power and courage, and he comes to knock you out. That's going to make this a great fight on March 30th. I'm thankful to my promoter, Manny Pacquiao, and my whole team for helping secure this fight for me. I will leave the ring as a world champion on March 30th, and yeah, that could happen. But you're trying to sell people this fight with these two guys by telling people that these two guys were avoided when all the evidence is to the contrary. Isaac was literally ordered to fight Shakur Stevenson.
you ducked Shakur Stevenson, you ducked Ryan Garcia, the guy you're fighting. Rolly Romero. Yeah, nobody ducks Rolly.
Rolly's not a bigger name than Ryan. They share a common opponent with Gervonta Davis. And Ryan's fight with Gervonta sold substantially more pay-per-views than Rolly's fight with Gervonta. So we all know who the big name there is. And instead of fighting Ryan, you're fighting Rolly.
I wonder about the management. What kind of hierarchy of thought is going into these decisions? Whoever manages Isaac Cruz, whoever manages Rolly Romero, a fight with Ryan would have been bigger than this for either of them.
Yeah.
And yet they've chosen this.
Fighter's manager is intended to act as a buffer between the fighter and the promoter, someone who will fight for the fighter, negotiate on the fighter's behalf. But you can't tell me that that's what's going on here when you willfully put these fighters in smaller fights.
Fighter's manager has a fiduciary duty to that fighter to get them the best deal. And this is not the best deal for Rolly. This is not the best deal for Isaac, but here we are.
I've long suspected there is a gross and negligent conflict of interest as it pertains to PBC fighters in what fights they reject and what fights they accept, because fiscally, it makes absolutely no sense for fighters to regularly turn down these big opportunities for smaller ones that keep them on the island. The managers that represent these fighters are supposed to be negotiating on the fighter's behalf with the fighter's best interests in mind, but it seems more and more like they have the banner's best interests in mind, not the fighters. Why would they do that?
Cash incentives.
It's the only explanation. Where the manager's supposed to be acting on the fighter's behalf, it seems like these managers are in cahoots with Al, are in cahoots with the PBC. You're doing what's best for the PBC, not what's best for the fighter.
Know what your fighter's limitations are. You know that he could lose either one of those fights, yet you choose to put him in a smaller fight.
How's that benefit him?
It doesn't.
But it might benefit the manager. The manager receiving kickbacks from the promoter to ensure that the fighter stays put. The fighter, that content as it were, it doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't go to some other side of the street to make money for someone else. Cash incentives, folks. Cash incentives. That's how I reconcile this card's co-main event. In the main event, we're going to be seeing Tszyu take on a quasi-retired Keith Thurman, and Tszyu says that Thurman will be dropped in under 6 rounds.
The PBC doesn't make any sense to me. As a consumer, as a boxing fan, it makes absolutely no sense.
None from the consumer perspective. Because here you have a fighter who fought 3 times last year, 3 times. And those were good fights. Tim, he held up his end of the bargain, stayed in the winner's bracket, looked good doing it. And all 3 of those fights were better fights than this fight. But yet this fight is more expensive than those fights.
So why should I pay to see it?
I should pay to see inactive Lara versus inactive Michael Zarafa, Tszyu versus inactive Keith Thurman in a non-title fight. That's the main event. Or is the incentive for me to pay to see this? Pay per view. Pay to see Rolly and Isaac.
They don't make any sense.
To the paying customer, it makes absolutely no sense to have to pay $80 to see Tszyu in a Weiss fight than any of the fights you saw him in last year. And those fights didn't run you $80 a pop. This one does.
The Harrison fight, the Ocampo fight, the Mendoza fight.
Of course, I can reverse engineer how we got here, analyze what the circumstances are and what they might be to try and understand this decision on the PBC's behalf. I can do that, but I don't have to agree with it just because I understand it.
You can put this fight behind a paywall, but that doesn't mean people are going to buy it, even if they understand why you're doing that. Now, as a content creator, I'm in a unique position.
I can buy the fight, watch it live, give my live reaction to the fight here on YouTube on this channel, and not only make the money I spent back from the live stream, but make money in the process. However, for the average American boxing fan who isn't a content creator, well, they don't have that option, and you're asking them to come out of pocket $80 to see a fighter they saw last year 3 times for no additional charge.
What is your justification to the consumer gonna be? We got the boot off Fox, we got the boot on Showtime, and Amazon didn't give us a budget. So now we want you to pay us to see this.
Now, I'm a fan of Tszyu's boxing. I have been for some years now. Long before he jumped into bed with the PBC and him potentially fighting Jermell Charlo became a conversation, became a thing. I was a fan of Tim long before that, and I still am a fan of him, though I fear that this relationship he has with the PBC, it's having an adverse effect.
Fighting Keith Thurman is a step backwards, not forwards. It's not a step up in competition, it's a step backwards. I don't care what he was.
Elitism in the sport of boxing. Elitism is something you have to maintain. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Maybe you might have been a halfway decent fighter in 2017, but it's not 2017. It's 2024. You haven't fought in 2 years. Now he's headlining a pay-per-view in what is a non-title fight that will undoubtedly cost at least $75 to $80 to the consumer. Progressively lowering the bar of standard for what passes for a boxing match in a box office fight in America. That is Al Heyman's real legacy and his real contribution to the sport of boxing, especially in the American market. While other promoters, major ones, are rolling out comprehensive schedules of fights going into the spring, forming partnerships, relationships with big investors over there in Saudi to bring us big boxing matches. While they're doing that, this guy's telling you that you've got to pay $80 to see Tszyu fight a guy that hasn't fought in 2 years.
And I know what the Heymanites are gonna say. The Heymanites are gonna say, well, if you don't like it, don't buy it.
Which explains why the boxing market in America has been shrinking the last 5 or 6 years. The audience that consumes boxing matches, that's what they're telling themselves. Yeah, I like it, but I don't like it that much.
It's an all-right card, but it ain't $80 all right.
And this is Al Heyman's real legacy, his real contribution to the sport, progressively lowering the standard for what passes as a box office fight, a pay-per-view in America, progressively lowering the standard of boxing overall. The saving grace is that the other boxing outfits, the other major ones, they're not gouging the boxing fans the same way he is. Top Rank don't do as many pay-per-views.
Neither do Golden Boy or Matchroom. They don't do as many pay-per-views as the PBC, but if they don't, you have to ask yourself, why is the PBC's content so much more expensive?
A couple of Canelo fights I can understand, maybe even Gervonta, but I should have to pay you $80 to see Tszyu fight a retiree.
Are you on drugs?